Going over to the political part of the podcast, you have a Minnesota mayor saying they want to ban guns. They want to get rid of assault rifles, also known as black rifles, also known as a standard semi-automatic rifle. Now, this brought to us thanks to the Bradleys over at X.com. They say Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey says they want a nationwide federal ban on assault weapons, which again is a term that Democrats, evil and smart, they actually did polling and they did a bunch of studies to see what's the scariest way we can refer to firearms. They actually did poll different terms like, sniper rifle, pistol, and they found that assault rifle scares people that are uneducated about guns. They're trying to make people think that everyone has a machine gun. I wish that were the case. However, machine guns have been restricted since the 1934 NFA Act, or National Firearms Act of 1934, and because of Ronald Reagan in 1986, that means if you want a machine gun, which I would argue is your God-given right, the machine gun had to be manufactured as well as registered with the U.S. government before 1986, and because supply demand is very expensive. So a full auto AR-15 or full auto M4, those are about $30,000 now because, again, had to be manufactured and registered before 1986, and your state has to allow it. More than half the states do. So your standard $1,000 AR-15 is now $30,000 if it has that fun switch. Now, obviously, he's mentally vacuous. He's a Jacob. Well, let's hear what he has to say. I was about to make a joke, say maybe he gives some very articulate good reasons. Obviously, he doesn't, but we'll hear what Mr. Jacob has to say.
We need a statewide and a federal ban on assault weapons.
Never gonna happen. Go stay vigilant. Morons clapping like seals.
We need a statewide and a federal ban on high-capacity magazines.
Never gonna happen. High-capacity magazines. When they say that, they're referring to this. A standard 30-round PMag. Well, this is a PMag because it's manufactured by Magpul. I mean, they're so common I give them away as a promo or just, to clients. 30 rounds. That's the standard capacity as invented and given out with a rifle when Eugene Stoner invented the AR-15 all those years ago. Ironically enough, in California, the most gun-restricted state out there, when he worked for Armalite. That's why it's called the AR-15, the Armalite rifle. Now, he says he wants to get rid of high-capacity magazines. Now, maybe, I don't think he is, he's referencing the 60-round magazine that the trans shooter had. But again, trying to blame the object. He's not asking, maybe we should talk about Big Pharma. Maybe we should talk about who forced this kid to transition, who brainwashed him, who abused him. No, they're going to try to blame the inanimate object and use every tragedy they can to push their agenda like Democrats always do. And again, we've had this before. We had the assault weapons ban in 1994. They lasted until, was it 2004 or 2008? They had the same thing where they tried to limit those magazine sizes to 10 rounds. They got rid of some characteristics on scary black rifles. Guess what? The same amount of mass shootings happened. It had no effect. 3 independent studies showed that it had no effect. In addition, I would argue, to being unconstitutional. And thanks to the Brewer effect, yeah, they're not, in terms of the Supreme Court, they said you cannot ban firearms in common use. And yeah, those PMags, I mean, there are probably no less than, what is it, 30 million of these in the United States, at least? I would argue that's pretty common use.
There is no reason that someone should be able to reel off 30 shots before they even have to reload.
Yes, I can name many reasons. Well, one is mobs trying to attack your house. Number one reason, though, is the government. Does the government have that? Then you deserve to have it. That's what the founding fathers wanted. But he said there's no reason to have that. Well, if he said there's no reason, then why do police have it? Why do militaries have it? If you read anything by the founding fathers, no, leftists usually don't. They wanted the people to have the same, nay, more firearms than the actual government themselves.
We're not talking about your
Also, you want to limit it to 10 rounds. You have that in places like California, one of the most dangerous states out there. Places like Chicago. I mean,
father's hunting rifle here.
Yes, that's because the Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. Democrats have been saying this for almost, decades upon decades. Yeah, the founding fathers didn't give a shit about hunting. They cared about an evil totalitarian government. They cared about a government having more power than the people. They feared that. That's why they said the Second Amendment is so important.
We're talking about guns that are built to pierce armor and kill people. Why do we have them coming in by the trunk loads onto our streets around the country?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, a myriad of uses. It says armor piercing. Yeah. Not by standard. You have the green, they call them armor piercing, but not really. Like the light crap. Why do we need all this? Yeah, because we're American and we don't trust our government. It's our God-given right to have that.
And this is not just about Minneapolis.
One of the most dangerous places already.
Because you can buy an assault rifle in Milwaukee, and that assault rifle is in Minneapolis by noon that very same day. And so when we talk about the...
So if your state already has those bans, that'd be interstate commerce. So I guess that'd be breaking the law. But Democrats say this a lot. And I grew up in the Midwest, better or worse, and they'd always say, you know, Chicago is so bad, but the guns always come from, you know, Indiana, right next door. I mean, that's why it's so bad. We have all the restrictions in Cook County, which encapsulates the shitty of Chicago. But yeah, if it wasn't for Indiana with their loose gun laws, you know, Chicago would be safe and great, which is laughable. Although dark humor is kind of sad because people die there because of the terrible leadership they have in Chicago and the culture. But easy way to disprove that. Well, why isn't it happening over there? You're saying, oh yeah, well, you know, it doesn't work here because the guns keep coming from Indiana. Indiana's more lax on guns. Why isn't the crime terrible? Why is Chicago so much worse? Chicago has the laws that say can't own it. Indiana, a lot safer. A lot of places, in fact, places with the most amount of firearm ownership usually have the lowest amount of crime. I can't but almost joke in Texas, people get mad when you cut each other off, but usually it doesn't escalate because there's a 98% chance that someone's packing heat in their car. I'm only partially exaggerating those statistics, but not by much.
Work that needs to be done. It's going to take a whole lot of unity from a lot of different cities, and I've gotten calls from their mayors who have experienced virtually the same thing that we experienced yesterday. And because we love our kids, because we love our family.
You love your kids, but you insist and you actually made Minneapolis a sanctuary state, or Minnesota a sanctuary state, by saying, oh yeah, we love our kids. We're going to pump them full of hormones and drugs that we have no effect what's going to happen long term, and also allow surgeries to butcher them. That's their definition of love. That's horrifying.
Because we love our constituents, we all have the obligation to act. And what you see here
is a loser.
You see federal congresswomen. You see we see our Minneapolis state delegation. You have council members from both Minneapolis and St. Paul. You have our sheriff. You have Moms Demand Action, Protect Minnesota.
Those broads.
And every town, all united and rallying around a common theme, which is keeping our cities and our country safe.
Except for Big Pharma, the surgeries, and also disarming law-abiding citizens, such as teachers. A lot of shitty states disarm teachers. I would argue their God-given right to defend themselves and their students. A lot of, interestingly enough, you have the opposite, place like Georgia, where after a shooting happened, they said, you know what, we're going to empower our teachers, and we're going to put up a sign that says, if you mess with this school, you'll leave in a body bag. They literally had a sign on a Georgia school that says, 9 of our 12 teachers are packing. Guess which ones? Again, a lot of people are going after these schools because they are soft targets because they are so poorly defended. Many of them don't even have an armed guard on site. And most of them say, teachers, you're not allowed to carry. Which is sad to think that our banks, our sporting stadiums, our sports balls arenas, and most of our areas are better defended than children. But let's see what he has to say. Maybe he has, I was about to say, maybe he has a more than two brain cells. I'm giving him too much credit, though.
And here's the thing. To the extent the federal government isn't willing to do it, to the extent a divided legislature prevents our state from acting, and by the way, I know that our Minneapolis delegation is on board with this work because they've been doing it. Thank you.
Weak Concord state. Though Concord, they have a new flag based on Somalians.
But here's the final ask.
Oh, okay.
To the extent other levels of government are either unwilling or unable to keep cities safe, let us do it ourselves. We are responsible for 435,000 residents that call Minneapolis home and many more that come and go. I think we'd be happy to ban assault rifles here in Minneapolis.
A lot more victims of Somalian crime, too. Yeah. Thank God for the Supreme Court, though some of them are morons. Because again, the standard right now is you cannot ban firearms in common use. That is a legal precedent by the United States Supreme Court, Brewer Effect. And, well, thankfully, how many AR-15s are there? Now, I asked Grok, and I think this is lowballing it. I asked him, how many AR-15s do civilians own in the United States? Now, it estimates 20 to 24 million AR-15s. Now, again, those are based on guesses by people who fill out background checks or 4473s, and, based by a guesstimate of how many times, stores are asking the government for background checks, to signify a gun sale. However, that also doesn't count guns that are manufactured at home in terms of, homemade AR-15s, one of the easiest rifles to make. I would venture to say there's at least, if I had to guess, 40 million AR-15s in the United States. I mean, I'm pretty damn sure that counts as common use. So, if the Supreme Court continues to have a modicum of intelligence, not guarantee, but yeah, they're going to make sure the AR-15 stays around. Now, it's been disappointing. Some of the Supreme Court, they've actually pushed away some pro-gun cases. They said, oh yeah, no, we're going to take those on, which I think is like how they acquiesce from their responsibilities from time to time. But yeah, he's saying the same cliche thing Democrats have done for decades. And spoiler alert, it's been tried in many states, in many cities. I'm sorry, shitties, as I pejoratively call them. Chicago being one of the poster boys. I remember, thankfully, I was not in the county of Cook County, which encapsulates the shitty of Chicago, but they had an issue where they actually banned ownership of certain guns based on patterns like the AK-47 and AR-15. Spoiler alert, did nothing to deter crime at all. Did nothing to deter the number of gangbangers who are shooting up each other on the weekend, a number of innocent people who are perished. And had no effect. I mean, California has banned it for I think multiple decades. They've had a magazine limiter in California. I mean, they have firearms that are called California compliant. They're bastardized beyond all belief. It's ridiculous how rudimentary the firearm becomes in order to be compliant with California. So they're trying, and again, this happens, it's kind of the cliche. I mean, Dianne Feinstein is famous for this. She actually, after shooting, she actually brushed off, she had legislation in her desk. She goes, oh yeah, we'll use this. And she said she was literally waiting for her time to bring it out. Kind of horrifying that they literally wait for tragedies and then try to exploit them. Now, again, who is responsible for this trans shooter shooting up the Catholic school? Well, he was underage, so I would argue the parents had some culpability. Psychiatrist, the parents also started to transition the child, pump him full of hormones, doing God knows what to his brain, maybe putting him on SSRIs. Democrats will blame everything except the firearm. And yet, it's been tried time and time again. Unconstitutional, has no effect, except, I would argue, hurting law-abiding citizens, who now more than ever need to defend themselves. I would argue, wherever you're going, if your state allows it, and I was going to say not legal device, maybe it doesn't allow it, but you should be strapped, and properly trained, of course. You should be having concealed carry on you at all times these days. Because it's up to you to defend yourself and your family. Police are going to be always late, just kind of the very nature. They're a reactionary force. They will get to the situation eventually, but why not stop the shooter? Why not stop the bad guy infinitely quicker so there's not so many casualties? And in terms of Minneapolis and Minnesota, which has become a weak conquered state, they may very well try to ban them in their state. It's not out of the realm of possibility. That's why I always tell people, be vigilant. Again, we are waiting. More and more states have passed constitutional carry. Used to be and again, I still suggest taking a concealed carry class because you learn the legal ramifications of shooting a firearm. Again, if you shoot a bad guy, you're still going to go to jail. You're still going to get charged. You might even get charged civilly or sued. So again, it's a momentous thing to take a life, even if it's taking one in a good way, so to say, in terms of preserving more lives by killing a bad guy. But we're seeing more and more good things happen to pro-gun initiatives. Now, in terms of the school, I think teachers should always be armed if they're competent and they choose to. Shouldn't be forced to do it necessarily, perhaps. But yeah, it's ridiculous to see more and more of these kids hurt in public schools, and it's ridiculous that we guard everything except schools in the United States. And again, some of them do have a on-site police officer. I would argue that's one person. Why not all the teachers? Again, it's deterred crime before. Why not do it again? So again, stay vigilant. Always donate. I'm not going to pitch any specific pro-gun organizations. Some of them are better than others. I don't get paid by any of them. But yeah, I would say do some research on which pro-gun initiative or nonprofit you prefer in terms of preserving the Second Amendment. Because again, they'll never stop going after the Second Amendment. They hate it so much. They want the government to have all the power, even though freed anything by in the Federalists or the Founding Fathers, they want people to have the same, if not more, guns than the Founding Fathers. I mean, even battleships, cannons, everything that the government had, people had greater. But let's go to the comments, because maybe someone will agree with that douchebag mayor. Scrolling down, one of the first ones, well, not first number of likes, but most handsome ones from the topping show. I say, quote, "Nothing they hate more than freedom and true equality. God made man, Samuel Colt, Gaston Glock, and Eugene Stoddard made him equal," which, yep, 110% true. A good quote. Obviously, I'm biased. Texas Patriot says, quote, "How about the federal ban on Democrats?" Getting 129 likes. You have Truth Warrior saying, quote, "Hunter Biden was pardoned from 3 gun-related crimes. I do not want to hear about another liberal or Democrat talk about gun control laws." Got 100. I got 103. This week, 104 likes. Yeah, Hunter Biden famously lied on a 4473. Again, think of it as a background check or your job application to buy a gun. He lied. He was on drugs at the time. On that piece of paper, he signed and said, "Oh yeah, I agree, I'm not on drugs." He was. He also disposed of a firearm in a school. Was it a garbage bin within throwing distance of his public school? So he threw away a loaded firearm into a garbage bin right close to a school. And of course, he was not charged. He got a pardon, of course. Let's see here. Let's see. Excommunicado says, quote, "Rifles of any kind were involved in 297 deaths last year in America." It says constipation killed 2,167. Of course, CDC and FBI getting 25 likes, which, yeah, that's another thing. They always want to go after black rifles, which I think is kind of a little racist. That's why I get tan rifles. But in all seriousness, yeah, more people are killed by blunt objects in the United States than actual rifles. I mean, literally baseball bats. More people die from those types of deadly interactions versus rifles. By far. It's literally 10x more. You also have Ralskin, what is this? Ralskin Slim, quote, excuse me, from Ronald Reagan, says, quote, "We must reject the idea that every time a law is broken, society is guilted, rather than the law breaker. It is time to restore the American principle that individual accountability is accountable for his actions," getting 68 likes. Birds Freed has some picture of the British, and they're saying, "Kids are crying on TV, give us your guns for the children." And founding fathers say, "F off," getting 46. They get 47 likes. Santa's Tavern says, "Fortunately, the government does not have the authority to enact such a ban." There's a quote that says, "How many children have to die before you'll give up your guns to protect them?" And me, it says, "How many children have to die before you'll pick up a gun to protect them?" In 45, so 46 likes. We also have Chef Velasquez saying, "Idiots, the only criminals who have guns," getting 17, 18 likes. Colton Steele says, "The real problem is the transgender mental illness," getting 61 likes, going up like a stock. But of course, Democrats really ever address the actual issue. They always address the outlier. They never want to actually find a solution or fix the wound. They just want to put a Band-Aid over it. They don't want to address the core issue of not the core causation. They want to go after the inanimate objects. Yeah, Jack Flynn says, "Cool, you have a bunch of Somalians coming in and you're going to disarm your citizens. Good job electing these losers." Getting 34 likes, which, yeah. Again, they've imported so many Somalians, they changed the state flag to a rudimentary, stupid flag that looks like one that's a bastardized version of a Somalian flag. Yeah, Chris says, "Never going to happen, soy boy," getting 14 likes, which it actually might. Minnesota is extremely blue. And states have passed similar bans in the past. I mean, California is the best example of having a assault weapon ban, quote unquote assault weapon ban, and having a magazine restriction or magazine limiters. Let's see. I don't see any contrarian statements thus far. Crackle says, "Guns don't kill people. People do, dumbass," getting 10, so I get 11 likes. Rob B says, "Bro is surrounded by Somalians and he wants to ban his state from having guns," getting 7 likes. Mark Rudolph says, "We need a statewide ban and federal ban on Democrats," getting 11 likes. Let's see. Tim says we need to ban morons like him getting 9 likes. A lot of people just saying, what about no? But again, I would argue stay vigilant. Make sure you're actually letting your opinion known to your electors. Say, hey, I'm pro Second Amendment. This is not the way to fix the problem. And of course, I would argue donate to one of those good, well, effective nonprofits that actually fights for our rights. But in terms of could this happen in Minneapolis? Could this happen in Minnesota? Yeah, unfortunately it can. Horrifying. I think that is a possibility. But let me know your thoughts, because as always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Again, try to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the month, so click that button. I greatly appreciate it. Also, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, and a comment. It's a great way to give me some additional feedback, letting me know how I can make the show better and better. Lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone, everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.